welcome to this video. This video is the books I read in April. I'm gonna preface this video by saying that this is not all the books I read in April. I did share a couple of my books in some of the weekly vlogs that I've posted for April, so if you are a book nerd like me and you wanna know more, go back and watch those weekly vlogs. Moving forward though, I thought it would be easier to just combine all of my book reviews and book thoughts into one monthly video every month. Let's just jump right in. The first book that I'm gonna review is The Last Vanish by Miranda. This book I gave 3 stars. So quick summary of the book. It takes place in a small town called Cutter's Pass, which is on the Appalachian Trail. There are all these disappearances and people come to this town because they're fascinated with the morbid idea of people vanishing. So it's kind of become a tourist trap, but while there's tourists that are there trying to dig into the lives of the people that have disappeared, there is also a population of locals who are there who almost want to either hide from this town's notorious reputation or else they want to embrace this town's notorious reputation. So the book starts with the brother of one of the vanished people coming to the inn where he vanished. And our main character, Abby, works at this inn, and it kind of follows her as she tries to help the brother. She also tries to just dig a little deeper into what happened to these people, why they vanished, and what's going on in Cutter's Pass. In terms of prose, I love the small town vibe. It was like creepy small town. I thought the whole disappearances thing, it really kept you guessing, and I thought it was a great setting for the novel. There were quite a few twists in this book. Some of them were completely unexpected. The twist with Abby was absolutely just mind-blowing. I had no guesses that that was going to be happening, and it definitely caught me off guard. In terms of cons, I felt like there was a little bit too much going on with this book. There was so many things happening, so many twists and turns that at times it felt a little chaotic, and it was hard to identify and follow certain storylines. I thought there was a little bit too much gap between the outsiders versus the insiders. So it's a small town, right? And there's these locals who are very devoted to the town, and then you also have all of the people who come and gawk at this town's history. And so there's definitely this divide between insiders versus outsiders. I think that the premise of this idea was great, but I felt like there was just a little bit too much description and a little bit too much butting heads of insiders versus outsiders. Like, we didn't need quite that much description about insiders versus outsiders. The last thing is that I felt like the pacing left a lot to be desired. The pacing was very slow in the beginning of the book and then almost too fast at the end. As it was, I just feel like it was either boring or hard to follow. Overall, I did enjoy this book. I think that there were things that could be improved. I would be interested in reading more of her stuff. I think that she has a great mind for planning novels, and I would be interested in reading more of her thriller suspense books. The next book that I read was The Dead in Their Vaulted Arches by Alan Bradley. This is a Flavia de Luce novel. This is the 6th one in the series. This book I give a 5 stars. I love the Flavia de Luce series. I think it is witty, it is dry, it's humorous. If you like any sort of like Agatha Christie, if you have a dry sense of humor, if you like witty writing, this series and Alan Bradley's work is definitely for you. Quick summary, Harriet, her mother, comes home, and Flavia, at one part of the book, she tries to like resurrect her mother. Another part of the book, she's trying to figure out, of course, there's a death and who, is trying to solve the mystery of the death. This book is not so focused on the murder. It's more focused on her family and different kinds of things that are happening in her family, which I actually really enjoyed. So prose, I love that we learned a lot more about Harriet. I love that Harriet had her moment to shine in this, the film, the cine film that Flavia develops, which is really cool to kind of get to meet Harriet almost. I also loved the juicy details, like learning about Aunt Felicity and Winston Churchill and pheasant sandwiches. I won't say anything else, but I mean, I think we have this inkling all along of like what's happening with the de Luce family, but this was very straightforward. We get a very clear representation of where the stuff is going and what's happening. The only con that I have for this book was it was just so much feels. Like, for an almost 12-year-old girl to like, her mother's body comes home and she's dealing with this loss and this grief that she's never really dealt with before, because Harriet was kind of like just almost like a figure of her imagination. She was a very like untouchable figure before, but now she's home. And it's very clear Flavia has to deal with her mother's death. She has to deal with the grief of what this means. And also she ends up dealing a lot with the grief from her other family members, particularly her father. This was a really good book. I think it was my favorite in the series so far, actually. I love this series. I would definitely recommend it, and I hope that we learn more about the Luce secret contract with the government. The next book I'm reviewing is The Paris Apartment by Luce Foley. This book I would rate 4 stars. Quick summary, there is a lady named Jess, and she's been invited to Paris by her brother, and she gets there and her brother is nowhere to be found. So she is essentially interviewing the people who live in the apartment building, trying to figure out what happened to her brother. There's a lot more detail to it, but I don't want to give anything away, so I'll just say that Jess has a little bit of a troubled past, her brother may have a little bit of a troubled past, and it seems like every occupant in this apartment is hiding something. So in terms of prose, I thought the plot was great. I thought it was captivating. I did like the way that she almost shifts narration from character to character. So maybe Jess is narrating once and then we see the version from Mimi's side, or we see it from Sophie's side. I can't remember if it's Sophie or Sophia, but I love that there was like a dynamic of getting into each character's head and understanding the motivations and experiences and actions of each character. I also loved how there's like kind of a lot of plot twists. Like you kind of think the book's going one way and then just kidding. And then you think it's going other way and then just kidding. And so the way that the book ends, I could guess part of it, but the other part of it completely threw me off and I was left guessing. I had no idea that was coming. I really love the way that she uses the French language. I love the way that she talks a lot about the French culture. It was very interesting. I've never been to Paris. I don't speak French. And so I thought it was kind of interesting to get this little glimpse into what life is like in France, what Paris is like. There's a lot of use of French language, but she translates it in a way that an English reader can understand. But it really helped kind of immerse you into the setting of being in Paris. I have kind of a pro-con. I'm not sure if it's a pro, I'm not sure if it's a con. I found Jess pretty annoying. She's the main narrator, and I think that that was on purpose though. I think that she was written that way because it's almost like you don't want to like her, but you sort of have to like her because of her persistence in trying to find her brother. Another thing, like I really thought her bravery was commendable. She just went out there, she said things, she did things that I think a lot of people might hesitate to do. She was maybe a bit like bold and brave, and sometimes that came off as a little bit abrasive. But I also thought it really added to her character, and it really helped us understand like this could actually happen in real life. Like you could actually meet a person who was like this, who would go to the ends of the earth to try and find out what happened to their brother. So then the only con that I really had was there were some times where the perspective shift from narrator to narrator was a little bit redundant. Like there would be a time where Jess would be explaining something and then, you know, another character would go and explain almost the same thing. So especially in the beginning, I felt it a little hard to get into the book because I felt like it was a little bit repetitive of things that we had already read. I think overall this didn't interfere with the storyline, and I think once you get past that towards the middle and end of the book where it picks up pace a little bit, you kind of get past that initial frustration with the redundancy. All right, I just finished another book and I wanted to make sure and include it in this month's book reviews. So here we go, new background, new outfit, new day. The book that I read was The Marlow Murder Club by Robert Thorogood. So this book I gave 3 stars. A little summary of the book. We have the main character, her name is Judith Potts. She is an eccentric, like, septuagenarian, octogenarian, I'm not really sure. She's an eccentric older lady, and she lives in Marlow, and she basically is out swimming in the river, and she hears her neighbor get shot, and come to find out that he was murdered. And there are subsequent murders as well, and her and a couple of friends, these friends that she kind of makes along this journey, the Marlow Murder Club, as they call themselves, have to figure out like the identity of the serial killer, what's happened, the motive, all of those things. So it's your typical like murder mystery, kind of cozy mystery sort of vibe. So in terms of prose, I thought that the idea, the culprits behind the murder, or the culprit of the murder, I thought it was interesting. I think it was like an interesting plot line. I think it was an interesting idea. I feel like it was fresh and it wasn't something that you necessarily see all the time in books like this. Unfortunately, that sort of wraps up my pros list. As you can tell by my rating, I really wasn't a big fan of this book. I thought the book was okay. It was enjoyable, but I don't think that it was anything to write home about, unfortunately. It just really didn't vibe with me personally. So in terms of cons, I think the number one thing that really irritated me about this book was the way the writing, the way that it was written, it almost felt like you can tell that the author is trying to be eccentric. Like, Judith is an eccentric character. I mean, all the characters, Bex and Susie are both eccentric. And so I can tell that he's trying to sort of convey their personalities and the uniqueness of these characters in the way that he writes. I think that's all well and good, and I applaud him. I think he did that well in certain places of the book. However, the majority of the time, I think that the writing in the book and the language just felt childish. Like, there's like a difference between being quirky and then almost being childish. And I felt like this, unfortunately, that this book teetered on the edge of childish most of the time. The second con that was really big for me was that I really didn't resonate with any of the characters. I think I liked that Judith was sort of a fun, unique character, but I think that she was a little bit too outlandish. Like, here she is living alone in this mansion by herself, and she gets naked and she goes skinny dipping in the river, like, that runs through her neighborhood. And I just was like, okay. Again, I get that he's trying to be unique and he's trying to be quirky, but it also felt like a little bit too overdone. The other characters as well, like Bex was a housewife, and you could tell that she took a lot of pride in her role of being a housewife. She was like a neat freak, all these things. I think she was like overdone, right? Like, of all the characters, I feel like I would have resonated most with Bex, but she almost seemed like too weak, too meek, and just overdone, like over exaggerated. And for Susie, I think that Susie was definitely like the wild card of the three. I almost think she was like too much of a mess. Like, the fact that her house is like half done, and it's just like every time, everything that she does, she's just like a wild card, and like nobody knows what she's gonna say, and like all these things. I just think it was just, again, overdone. Honestly, the character that I liked best was Emma. Like, I think maybe if we had a whole book about Emma, I would have enjoyed it more because Emma was a badass. So those are my reviews of the books that I read in April. I did actually read a few more books, and I delivered those reviews in a weekly vlog that I posted during April. So if you are interested in those reviews, you can go back and watch that weekly vlog. I will link it below for you here. I will have quite a few reviews for you for the month of May, because I have a lot of books in progress that I am very close to finishing. So stay tuned for those reviews. And I hope you liked this video. If you have any recommendations of books that you think I would like, please leave it below in the comments. I love to know about new books and start new series and read new authors, so I am here for it. Thanks for watching. Please consider subscribing if you like this video, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!